And we're live with Alan McSmith today on Deep in the Bush. Very, very happy to have Alan here. He is a wilderness guide, as opposed to being just a safari guide. And we're going to come back to that a little bit later on. And an elephant conservationist. There's some amazing videos out there. I urge you to look them up. There's actually one in the description here of Alan interacting with elephants. But first question I've got for you today, Alan, is why elephants?
Sure. Straight to the point. Hi, Peter, and thanks for the opportunity to join your chat. Why elephants? Gosh, well, not only are they the largest land mammal in the world, they're fairly conspicuous. I think they're a big part of the landscape on a safari. It's sometimes hard to miss them, although they can stalk and take cover behind a blade of grass. They can disappear so easily in the bush, but there's something about them, they're, if you're spending time with the elephant, I think a lot of our own virtues, the virtues that define us as human beings, empathy or respect or caring, teaching, learning, discovering, all these things you see in elephant, and they, in a sense, reflect or mirror our own virtues. So they're very human-like in many ways.
It's strange that, isn't it? Because physically you could not have an animal more different to it.
No. I think if you were to kind of build up an impression of an elephant based on YouTube or movies or comic books or documentaries, you probably could be 180 degrees away from how they actually are. They're incredibly intelligent. And what intelligence is and how we kind of set the bar of intelligence, maybe that's another interesting question. But elephant habit, I think there's a level of empathy and understanding that they have, and when you see them interacting, and when you look into an elephant's eyes, there's something. Peter, if you look into a buffalo's eyes, and this has got nothing against buffalo. I love buffalo, but in a curious kind of buffalo way, there's not a lot going on there, to be honest. But elephant, there is a depth that belies, when you look into an elephant's eyes. And I've seen an elephant walking along a game path and coming across a tortoise that was lying upside down on its back, with its legs wiggling in the air, completely stranded. And this elephant stopped, paused, turned back, and actually walked up to the tortoise and just flipped it over back onto its feet, and then carried on walking.
So what do you think a zoologist, biologist would describe as the elephant's motive for doing that?
That for me is now the crux of the issue,
Yeah.
The human being, the human brain or our intellect is said to be the most advanced ever in the history of everything, allegedly. So we kind of like to think that we can define what intelligence is and how we can measure it or judge it. And I think that's a little unfair. I think obviously an elephant can't do maths or quantum physics or anything like that. But I think the intelligence that we have is just another form of intelligence.
Yeah.
And as we've developed as a species, as an industrialized species, up to the point of where we're at in the world now, I think we've lost focus or lost track of different forms of intelligences, if you want to call it that. And one of them is the ecological intelligence. We are hopelessly ecologically backward.
Yeah, I could not agree more.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. The reason I was asking that moment you described the elephant, I've never heard this story from you before, and I hear it enough from people that spend a lot of time in the wilderness. These one small acts. If you said he rolled it over and then rolled it again and rolled it again, you'd say he was playing with an object that he treated as inanimate. But to tip it once, and considering the power an elephant possesses, the restraint that elephant had to show to tip it gently, that makes it sound as if its motive was to put the tortoise back on its feet. And that comes across as altruism, kindness. Now, that's something which we humans, we tend to clutch not just at we're the smartest, but we're the only ones capable of kindness or empathy. And
yeah,
I personally don't believe that's true, that we're the only animal possessing empathy. I feel I've seen it in elephants as well. So do you think that elephant's aim was just to make the tortoise's day better?
Definitely. I think you see you come across a moment like that, and so many people speak of these moments of interaction with wild elephant out in the bush, where for no reason at all the elephant will just approach you or come extraordinarily close, or maybe even touch you or touch the vehicle. And these interactions or moments with the tortoise are so common. Once you start opening up your mind and start paying attention to the sense of wonder that elephants have, you'll start to notice them more and more. So, yeah, I was left. I kind of I was watching this unfold in front of me, and as the elephant disappeared, I was left in no uncertain terms that it was a very conscious thing the elephant was doing. The sense of wonder was just apparent. It tipped the tortoise back on its legs.
No, okay, so here we go. Is how far are we going to say animals are intelligent? Do you think the tortoise was grateful, or the tortoise just registered now it was the right way up? With due respect to tortoises, I'm not sure that they've got that capability.
Well, I think look, some animals are more advanced and more complex than others. Elephant, whales, chimps, great apes, and then maybe on a more domesticated front, where it's probably easier or more intense to interact with the animals. Species like horses or dogs. People speak of incredible interactions with horses and dogs, but on a wild animal front, elephants are on top of the league as far as a land mammal goes, as far as I'm concerned. But you still have to. I don't think. A tortoise or a reptile or a crocodile still has a level of intelligence. It's just kind of not as aware, or maybe you don't pay as much attention to it because of our interpretation of what intelligence is. But if a tortoise is stuck on its back and it's floundering and its legs are in the air, it's showing extreme stress. So it knows exactly its fate. It's tickets for it if it can't get back on its feet.
I had a very surprising conversation recently on Deep in the Bush, with an animal trainer who has trained a saltwater crocodile, one of the only animals on the planet that treats humans as prey the moment they spot us. She was able to train it through positive reinforcement, wholly solely. And it's interesting because you always think that's, to me, would be the sign of an animal that wants to please you. It's only going to respond to positive reinforcement. So I think there is a lot of scope we're missing out on. And we've jumped pretty quickly into animal intelligence and emotions. I want to bring it back a bit if I can. And I mentioned these videos. I don't want people to start stalking you and go down a YouTube rabbit hole, or maybe you'd like that. I don't think that's you, though. The videos, the reason I like them so much is they show the opposite of a gung-ho attitude. It's like a wo-ho attitude, where through the calmness of your own body language, an animal who was behaving aggressively recognized that there was no threat and moved on. And that's something which I think a lot of guides can learn from. I know the first time I watched some of these videos, I couldn't decide whether you were incredibly brave, batshit crazy, or had tapped into something that the rest of us were missing. Now, when an elephant is charging or mock charging you, I was taught early on in my guiding career to make yourself as big as possible so that you're somehow more intimidating, which feels silly at 5'9" for me at least, versus an elephant. Perhaps you need to shout at it, make a lot of noise, and then you get the guys that go with a step further, firing warning shots. And some places where you're trained, they will tell you at this distance, put a bullet in its brain. There's those levels of training, but all of them, to me, having watched and been mentored by a lot of great people, that training's escalation rather than calming the scenario down. So when an elephant's coming at you, to this day, my heart rate goes up. Is it human nature from years of living side by side with hundreds of thousands of years of living side by side with elephants that makes us react the way we do, or is it bad training?
Yeah. Yeah, gosh, Peter, there's a lot to unpack in those questions, and I would like to start off by proposing that there's a different side to appreciating nature and animal behavior than you would learn from a conventional course or from guide training or from mentoring. And I think there's normally a time and a place to have this conversation or to propose these alternative ideas, because it's normally it challenges a lot of our contemporary understanding of what should be done, or what is safe, or what is batshit crazy, as you say. But I guess in a nutshell, if I can try and streamline your question, I think what happened there with that elephant and the elephant encounter, and I encourage your viewers and your listeners to go and have a look, because what happened there was exactly how it rolled out in front of me. We knew the elephant was there, and we were actually trying to get past him to get a better view of him away from the open area that he was in. And he just saw us, and he kind of just opened the taps and came straight towards us. And what was very interesting about the group of people that I had with me was we'd been together for about 3 weeks. It was actually on a training course, and the amount of time that we'd spent together, and it wasn't the first elephant interaction we had, and the longer you spend in wilderness, and the more you kind of download, the more you ask questions about it, the more you wonder how you connect with it, I think you start looking at it differently. So the folks that were on that walk were in a sense on the same wavelength.
Right. Yeah.
I wouldn't say we were prepared for what happened, but we were okay with having the elephant there at fairly close range. So when an elephant charges you like that, I think as a guide, and I wasn't armed, it was an area where we weren't carrying firearm. I think one of the most important things to have in place, or to hopefully have in place as a guide, is that the clients you're with are on the same relaxed wavelength or same energy levels as you. So I see my position, my role principally when something like that happens, I'm kind of like the scrum half that gets the ball out of the scrum. So I get the energy, or the way that we should be reacting. I determine that, and I pass the ball back to the clients. And there's a great deal of trust and cooperation involved, and it can be done without communication. It could be wordless communication. So just before the elephant came, I don't think you heard it in the video, but all I said was, just do what I do. And for me, as the guide, that crossed the invisible line between what is logic and what is not logic, because invariably you would assume that one of the clients would try and run, one of the clients would panic, one of the clients would want to get closer, one of them would, you'd have a little bit of a scrambled kind of scenario going on. And that's where things can go wrong. So I trusted completely. I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. I had no idea what the elephant was going to do or when it was going to stop. I just knew that the outcome was going to be what it needed to be, and I knew it was going to be good. That's all I knew.
Yeah, that's what's amazing is
I remember at the time I could feeling my heart rate. It was actually that my pulse was slowing at the time.
Right. Okay. I did actually look. I was looking for a watch like this because I was going to say, did you have your heart rate? Because at the end of it, you turn and you give a smile that has no nervousness behind it. It is like, oh, I enjoyed that. That's what the smile seemed to say. And again, I've had my fair share of elephant interaction. You've been doing this 30 years. I'm not there yet, but I've had many of those that I've thoroughly enjoyed. But as I said, my heart rate still spikes. You're saying you actually calm down.
Yeah. And, Peter, it took me a long time to post that video on social media because I'm also involved in the training industry. And I didn't want, as it did happen, I think it's a natural reaction. This is how human nature works. I think it's we kind of program to criticize or know better. So I was very hesitant to post the video because of the negative commentary that I would get. This guy's taking a chance. What is he doing? He's stressing the elephant out. He's endangering the client. Is all that kind of stuff, which did come my way. But what I did choose to do was to platform the video in a sense as a form of commentary about elephant awareness and elephant intelligence, because the video is essentially about the elephant. I'm just like an actor in the play. The elephant is the lead actor, and what the elephant did there was it showed how possible it is to connect with a person, or a person to connect with an elephant across a line that is not always considered that logic. And when the elephant moved away at the end, if you watch the video, there for a few seconds there, it was pretty touch and go, I must say. And when I saw the video afterwards, when I looked at the video, I thought, my God, did he come that close? And I didn't actually perceive what was happening in front of me. It was only through the video that I saw that. But what I was very conscious of was trying to get the elephant to calm down. And towards the end of the video, when he walked away at a very even, relaxed pace, his ears were relaxed. He didn't even look back, and that for me was an indication that we'd done the right thing. So we'd kind of taken the sting out of the situation, and the elephant was unharmed, the people were unharmed, and that for me was all important.
I think that's what you actually want from a wildlife interaction, is that there is no stress, residual stress from it. And that can occur. I mean, you can stress an animal with a vehicle, you can stress them on foot. The one thing I've seen quite a bit of lately is elephants freaking out with drones. They really don't seem to like that buzzing thing above their heads. You're pulling a face there. You've seen that too?
Yeah, it's the drone frequency. They just can't stand it. I'm not sure if they're associated with bees or like turbocharged bees, because one of an elephant's principal vocabs, they have such a complex language, and they have dialects of language, but there's one consistent warning sound, and that's the warning sound for bees.
Right.
Yeah, they are petrified of bees. So I suspect maybe a drone has got something to do with that frequency,
Yeah, and just for people who are trying to figure out why elephants are afraid of bees, consider where elephants feed. They're feeding in trees a lot. Quite often they'll be feeding on a tree which holds a hive. The bees swarm out, and despite the old name pachyderm, that means thick skin, there's plenty of soft patches on an elephant, and stinging around the eyes, you can imagine it's every bit as painful for them as it is for us. Tip of the trunk and so on around the genitals. So it is quite a strange thing to see an elephant run squealing. He said the largest land animal in the world runs squealing from tiny insects. But I mean, it makes sense that bee, as you said, turbocharged bees, it's going to upset them. But there's something you just mentioned then with dialects. You've guided and you've trained guides. I mean, you've trained guides in South Africa, Botswana, Chad, maybe other places as well. And I imagine you've guided in many, many more countries. Do you believe, or have you observed different cultures in elephants? Does an elephant from Chad, would it recognize an elephant from South Africa as a brother, or as a distant relative, or as a stranger?
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer, Peter. I do honestly believe that they have cultures. I it would be very interesting, I must say, to pick up a forest elephant and plonk him down in the middle of the Okavango and just sit back and watch, or an elephant from Damaraland in Namibia and show him all this water and greenery. It must be must be a spectator value there. But I think, without any way of proving it, I think this is what the sense of wonder of what elephants are, or what they are. I think this gives it to you. You see something happening before your eyes, and there's very little doubt in what's happening. Science may not be able to prove it, but the elephants in Namibia, the desert elephants, they react very differently to their feeding behavior is different, their movements are different, their attitude towards livestock is different, their attitude towards people is different, and I think they have a more sort of a light hand on the tiller, if you like, in being an elephant in the desert of Namibia, which is a brutal environment for an elephant. I mean, go figure, here's a large animal that needs to consume, 100 kilograms of food a day, to drink 3 bath loads of water a day in order to survive. And it's somehow doing it. And I think that's another chapter about what makes elephants fascinating, is how they actually go through these intense periods, like marathon runners, these elephants moving across arid plains in Namibia, going without water for a week, 10 days at a time, how they actually do it.
It brings it back to intelligence, actually, and it links in a few of the things you've said so far, where if you talk about those desert elephants who live at some point when they're in the Namib, that is the second driest place on the planet. Less than a centimeter of rain a year on average, and the oldest desert in the world. It's been a desert for 14 million years. The Sahara is a baby compared to that, thousands of years in many places. But the belief is they're not harming the trees because they need that to be there when they come back. There are so few trees. So if we are priding ourselves on being the most intelligent animal on the planet, yet, as the old crude phrase says, we're crapping where we eat, or pissing in our own well. We're destroying the place that we live on, the one planet we live on, and yet elephants have got it figured out. Are we the smartest animal?
Well, this is my question. What does intelligence mean? If, maybe what sets us aside, with all this crazy intellect that we have. I mean, we can fly to the moon, and we can invent. I'm having a discussion with you now over the internet in real time. I mean, that's crazy technology too. And what this has given us is a sense of comfort and a sense of being at ease with our world, because I've got my fan on here, Peter, because the office is hot, so I can just I can manipulate my environment. I can turn a fan on, or I can turn a heater on, or I can put a light on, so we've come to a point where we can manipulate our environment to suit ourselves. However, it's the environment that is manipulating us. That is the gold star that we are kind of losing focus on. And what sets us aside, I believe, as an intelligent species, I mean, I think there's only 1.2% difference between our DNA and the DNA of a chimpanzee.
The bonobo, I think it's a little bit more, slightly greater difference with a chimp, but with a bonobo, it's 1.2.
That's not a lot of difference, but a bonobo is worlds apart, ecologically so intelligent. I mean, I think what sets us aside is this kind of incredible sense of memory that we have, an incredible sense of imagination. So we either live in the past or the future. So all the data, all the information, all the things that we learn in our lives, we accumulate and we process to make a decision to improve our future. And quite often there's no distance between the two. We don't spend too much time in the present. And I think as a wilderness guide, I think that's kind of my principal role is to create just a little bit of space, a zillimeter of space, if you like, but between the past and the future. And that's where folks kind of that's where original thought and that's where original inspiration emerges from. And for me, that is intelligence. What you do with that information, or what you do with that inspiration, because it's coming from a good place. It can only be used productively.
That's fascinating. I spent some time a decade ago now with an ethnic group in the Ecuadorian Amazon called the Warani. Fairly late to make contact with the outside world. Many of them still live traditionally. Some of them I met were not born, were already born when they made contact with the outside world. And their language has no past or future tense. It only has the present. And they really talk about two states of being, which is hungry or not hungry. But they live in a jungle which is just filled with abundance. It's one of the only Spanish words they've taken on is abundancia. And so they talk about you're hungry or not hungry, and very much living in the now. You're comfortable, you're not comfortable. You're hungry, you're not hungry.
Yeah.
And whether it's coincidental or not, I'd hesitate to describe anybody as being the happiest people I've ever met, but they laughed more than any other group of people I've ever met in my travels around the world. There was just so much laughter all their time. And I think that's part of living in the now.
With all our modern technology, and we are certainly the most comfortable. I mean, you and I are living the most comfortable life possible ever in the history of the human race. But are we the happiest? Are we the healthiest? Are we the most peaceful? So I think intelligence comes at a cost, and with the speed of life, and with Peter, I think we take instructions from two facilities in life, two faculties, if you like. One of them is from our governments, from our leaders.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is from our corporate leaders, the commerce that drives the world. And both of those instructions are flawed because they're rooted in profit and personal gain, and they're rooted in encouraging people to lack respect for natural laws. And once you start going down that slope, I think nature will always come last. Wildlife, wilderness conservation will always come second in that. And for the most advanced or the most intelligent species ever, we have now been brought to our knees by a virus, which technically is not even a living thing. It's a bit of DNA of RNA. It's not even a living creature. I mean, I think we need to reflect quite intensely on this, and maybe that's what the last year could have or should have provided us is a little bit of downtime to actually figure out that there's the basic laws of ecology are, for me, where does your energy come from? Where does your energy go to? And the fact that there's a finite resource of everything. We need to kind of come back to that, and maybe that's the ecological intelligence that we have outgrown, that we need to reconnect with, and that for me is the principal role of a wilderness experience, or coming back to the bush to.
So how do you take, and I'm sure you must have encountered this, before we began this, you were talking about transformational. That's a word that's being used a lot in travel at the moment. I resist it a bit because I've seen places that call themselves, they say, we only do this. But to me, it's you can lead a human to transformation, but you can't make them accept it. They need to make that step. Have you ever had a case where you've got either a group traveling together or a couple traveling together? One is into it, but the other resists because it sounds airy-fairy, or for whatever reason they've decided they don't want to change. And have you managed to be the evangelist for the wilderness? It's a dirty word, evangelist, isn't it? But it should be positive. Have you seen that aha moment where you've shattered someone's cynical shell?
Yeah, it happens. and it does happen, and you're so right. We don't really have the vocabulary to talk about this properly. Evangelist, ambassador, transformation, leadership. What do these things actually mean? They're very real concepts, but we can't. I'm still struggling to actually pinpoint or come up with a word that actually gets it. So when you start talking about transformation or leadership, or people look at you as if you're like, ooh,
Yeah, it's like I'll go back to Instagram.
But when you get the same person out in the field, out in the bush, and you're talking about elephants, and you're experiencing this reconnection, this very primitive feeling, where you're out in the field tracking an elephant, a wild elephant, in Africa, and this is the motherland, as far as I'm concerned. And I think the wilderness experience, or the opportunity to reconnect, to go through that personal transformation, to go through that personal leadership process, whatever you want to call it, it's very strong and very powerful in Africa.
It's appropriate.
To say it's more than most. A lot of people speak of this. Africa is the X factor.
It's appropriate you have a map of Namibia behind you. That's a place where, if you want to feel space more than anywhere, I think it's second or third least densely populated country in the world. Mongolia, I think, is ahead of it. But and the further west you go there, by the time you're by that coast, which is ironically shaded green on your map, that's the place with no rainfall. And I've seen people have that moment of transformation when you leave them alone out there. And that is something else I think we've got away from, is the power of being alone. That's one of the things I'm most craving post-pandemic, post-COVID, is I just want to be alone for a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're so not alone in that. So many people speak of it, and I think this ecological intelligence that is still alive in us. I think whenever we are stressed, whenever we are tired, or intuitively we know we need a rest, or to regenerate, or reboot, or unplug, or however you want to call it. Where do we go? It's to a quiet place. You go for a walk on a beach, or maybe on top of a mountain, or maybe along a riverbed, or
right. Yeah, when you need a break, you don't go to a nightclub, do you?
No. Well, I guess there's some of us guys that may do that, but
I think that's not so much regeneration. That's trying to escape your own head, perhaps.
Yeah.
As opposed to work through something.
I think we're all trying to find. I think there's one thing that combines us or unites us as humans, Peter, and I believe that we're all trying to find solace in our lives. We're all trying to create better opportunity for us, for ourselves. And whether we seek that in a nightclub, whether we seek that out in the bush, or whether we seek it at a bar or in a church, or we're all trying to find just a little bit of space between our past and our present, just so we can reconnect with ourselves. And that for me is the principal reason why conservation of nature and wilderness is the most urgent priority of our time, because it's not the conservation of the outer landscape, the animals, the trees, the plants, the water, the air. Of course, that's crucial, but it's the conservation of this sacred attitude of empathy towards ourselves, first of all, and to other people. And if we lose that opportunity to have that space to reboot, how are we going to navigate through pandemics and social turbulence and spiritual turbulence? And the present, our generation. I've got 2 kids, and I live in absolute hope that my son, my daughter are far more intelligent than I am in a technological, in a way to communicate, in a way to set ideas out, in a way to connect dots. So you've got 2 or 3 good ideas. How do you actually make one big good idea out of that? And that's the hope, as far as I'm concerned, of conservation, is through our technology, through the internet, through communication, through discovery, that the young people will find solutions, bearing in mind that I don't believe it's possible to find a solution for an ecological problem. We cannot throw technology at it. We can't just bombard it with internet and with drugs, and it's not going to work. The human will has to be the driving force, and that is the crucial thing. And I think that's where our work as guides is so important, is to maintain this connection with nature. Technology is one way of dealing with it, but there's still the basic primitive human will that will prevail at the end of the day, or will not. The ultimate will determine how we are as a species.
It strikes me as absolutely crazy. I keep using that word today for some reason, about craziness, but to describe humans, with the rise of things like carbon credits and governments trying to hit climate quotas, that there's all this talk of burying or storing carbon, and that is worth points. It's like they're playing a video game. Governments, corporations playing this video game of, let me get points for doing this. And whereas nature has ways of doing this, how about so much carbon is actually sequestered in the ocean naturally. Let's look after that. The rainforest. And let's not forget, we always talk about the Amazon and its benefit. The second biggest rainforest is in Africa with the Congo. I know you've spent time there, or at least around the fringes of it. And that's also being chopped down. Any of the forests, the Southeast Asian forests, so important to be protected. Surely that's what we should be aiming for, instead of trying to use tech, as you said, to solve a problem that technology has created.
It won't work. Yeah, technology has created. And if you consider that they say 90% of the biomass on Earth is human beings and our livestock.
I got completely tripped up the other day, a little trivia type thing, and it said, what is the world's most abundant bird? And I was like, oh, I know this one. Formerly the passenger pigeon, now it's the red-billed quelea. And I was very, very proud. Who knows about the quelea? I know about the quelea. And then they said it's the chicken. So, of course it is.
Yeah.
World's most abundant.
I mean, that's a conversation stopper, isn't it? I mean, 90% of the livestock is humans and our livestock. 90% of the biomass, and that I think explains a little bit about our, if I can use the word, misuse of our intelligence, because there's been a headlong drive to progress, to proceed, to create more wealth, to create more opportunity, to create more profit. And let's be honest, it's all about commerce. And that's where we need to take a step away from. I mean, a fifth of the world's population consumes a quarter of its natural resources, and it's most millionaires and most billionaires reside in that segment of the population. So to move away from the growth of commerce is the first major step, and it's very difficult to understand how that can be done, considering where our sources of inspiration, our sources of instruction are coming from.
I had an interesting conversation recently with someone who's in both the world of commerce and climate change activism, such. And they were saying one of the driving forces now is actually commerce, in terms of trying to stem the effects of climate change, or stem climate change, because insurance companies are now having to pay out more and more because of the effects of man-made climate change. And so finally we're getting the economists on side saying, oh, this model that we've run with for, 100, 200 years of grow your population to grow your market, finally coming back to bite them in the ass, because as you said, resources are finite. That was never built into that model. But now that you can't have a mansion in Miami because a hurricane's going to flatten it, or build it by all means, but you will not be able to insure it, and it is going to get flattened. So suddenly it's like, right, well, the way to mitigate this is...
That's smart, That's smart, yeah.
So it's quite strange that maybe the hope for our planet, what an awful bloody thought, lies with the KPMGs and the likes of the world. I mean, I think we are going to see now is globally the outrage there always should have been about markets selling wildlife. I think now people are, there's going to be so much more of a global awareness of that. Nobody wants to spend another year locked in a house with their children. That's what teachers are for, is to raise your children for you. So it's been a rough one for me, as you might have picked up.
A lot of people are going to agree with that.
Yeah. I think, so we've got this strange thing now where all of these people are seeing the value of conservation, not just as animals are cute, let's keep them around.
Yeah.
The environment is pretty, let's keep it around, going, oh, if we continue our relentless assault on these environments and the animals within it, our lives are worsened, even though we feel we're in a protective shell of a city. I hate that it took something like this to bring that about.
Yeah.
And climate change, that these horrible things occurring, but finally got a hope. And you spoke about your kids. Do you find their friends, I mean, your kids have grown up with you as their dad, and I know your wife is also involved in the business, the industry, the conservation side. They've been led, I'm sure they've been schooled as much in wilderness as they have in spelling and sums. Do their friends come around and express any interest in what you do?
Yeah.
Are you the cool dad because you stand up, like you interact with elephants, or do they prefer the dad who drives a Porsche?
That's an interesting one. A bit of both, and it's actually remarkable. My son is 23 now. He's living in the UK, and when he was in primary school here in Hoedspruit, his group of mates, and it was a rural school. It was out in the bush. A lot of the lessons and a lot of the everything was done outdoors, under trees, out on foot, out walking, tracking in the bush, that sort of thing. And his mates that were in his class are now friends of ours. We're still a very tight community. Or, a bunch of 12, 13, 14-year-old guys just pulling into our house, just crashing on the couch, staying for the weekend, going for walks, talking about elephants, catching fish, getting covered in mud, and then going home. Let mom and dad go and wash all the mud off, But it was that kind of environment that I thought was so important, so valuable. And never once did I consider pressurizing our kids. Our daughter's 19. We also have an adopted son who's 28 now. But never once did I dream about pressurizing them to become activists or ambassadors or evangelists at all. There's so much contemporary and peer pressure on our kids today that all I was really trying to do was just create a soft place to be and an inspiring place to be, and then the choice was entirely theirs, or is entirely theirs. But those days they've made deep impressions. I mean, the bush has settled deep within our kids, and our son is a farmer. Our daughter wants to be a guide. So I mean, it's not so much the values of what I've done. I think it's the reconnection with the values of nature and how valuable that self-leadership actually is. I think that's the defining moment in a person's life.
And that's something which
doing a lot of trails and courses. We get a lot of guys coming through and wanting to become guides, and the industry is just saturated. There's just no ways we can accommodate everyone as a guide. So regardless if you become an astronaut or a surfer or a poet or a doctor or whatever it is, if you can be in touch with the best possible version of yourself, the most original, the most influential person that you can become, then perhaps that's leadership, and that is the intrinsic value of the wilderness experience.
Well, to put in more than you take out, or at least strive for it.
Yes, and to challenge the instructions of society. I mean, you talk about commerce, and I think the the bottom line of commerce today is the value of a forest is only apparent once it's cut down and made into poles and furniture. Then it becomes valuable. But without poles and furniture, the forest is not valuable. It's beyond value. It's just not for sale. Some things are not for sale. And to apply the logic of commerce in conservation, and specifically rhino or elephant conservation, I think is a very dangerous tightrope to walk. The adage that if you flood the market or you lower the price of ivory or horn, it would stop the poaching. It may have some effect, but it's not the solution. It's not even, for me personally, it's not even one of the solutions.
I've always found that slightly crazy as well. And for people who aren't familiar with this, there are arguments made there are people who farm rhinoceros specifically in the hope that the laws will change and then they can make millions, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions from selling rhino horn to the primary markets, which are Vietnam and China. And they give really compelling arguments. As you pointed out, they'll lower the price. There will no longer be the demand for wild rhino horns. Poaching will stop. But it takes a really long time to breed a rhino. It's 14 months gestation or so. Then the horn's got to grow to an adult size. Yes, advantage with a rhino is you can cut that horn off and it will grow again. But it's going to take years and you've got to feed that rhino throughout. Yeah. There's also, if you look at how many rhinos there are and how quickly you could breed them versus the population growths in the markets that want rhino horn, it just doesn't add up. It is impossible that you will ever come close to meeting demand. And again, it's something we've all learned during the pandemic. There have been certain things where the supply chains got interrupted. Everybody was at home trying to buy home gym equipment, none to be found. It had all been sold out. And people were clamoring and prepared to pay more. The second-hand market rose. You would see that with rhino horn in perpetuity until there were no rhinos left. I'm not an economist, and I can figure that out. It's not the ways. So
the bottom line, and it's not about commerce at all. It's about numbers. It's about common sense that there's just not enough rhino to sustain the demand. And the more horn is on the market, the more demand, the more the demand will escalate. So it's absurd to think that someone or a group of people can supply enough rhino horn to make a commercial business out of it.
No, some people would get very rich short term, and then I think we'd actually see a spike in poaching. Again. So
with the trade on the streets in where the outlets are in the east, there are people there that can set the prices so that they can escalate. They can set a demand, and suddenly the price will go through the roof, and then you'll see a spike in poaching. So the poaching is all driven by market manipulation in the east, and it's very cleverly done. It's professionally orchestrated, and I know for a fact that a lot of the rhino poaching networks are, as you say, stockpiling or sitting on the supply of rhino horn, and the sooner rhino become extinct, the better for them. Can you imagine what the price of horn would do once rhino become extinct? And that for me is just like, it's just madness. It's ecological madness, and all it is for your viewers and listeners, all rhino horn is a bit of fingernail. There's no medicinal, there's no pharmaceutical drug property whatsoever to rhino horn. There's no proof that it causes or that it cures anything, let alone cancer, which has been claimed by some guys in the east. So all it is Puritan. It's pharmaceutically it's useless. Leave it on the rhino.
They do actually need it. I mean, I think you and I could wind ourselves up on this conversation because it is just one of the most stupid things. And people like to hold on to archaic beliefs. I mean, most major newspapers still have an astrology section. But nothing's getting harmed by you saying, oh, you're just such a Sagittarius. And I don't know what you are and I don't care. But it's nothing's dying because of that
Yeah.
old belief. Interestingly, in Vietnam, which is the principal market for rhino horn, there is not actually a long-standing tradition of use of rhino horn.
Yeah.
It's quite modern, the demand, and it did come about from, I believe it was a general saying it had cured his cancer.
Yeah.
And the criminal syndicates that run the poaching and the sale of it leapt on this, met this new demand. So yeah, it's all around bad news. But I want to draw it back again a bit here to your personal experiences with elephants, and beyond the videos which we've spoken about, you must have had moments of great joy seeing things like elephants being born, perhaps, or mothers playing with young. That amazing experience with a tortoise being turned over. Are you ever intimidated?
I can answer that quickly and honestly, no.
Right. And why do you think that is?
I would like to believe that I have a tremendous amount of respect for elephant. I understand that they are highly advanced, highly sentient animals that, and one of the things that, running guide training courses and the content I was given to lecture guides, they spoke about animal reactions, and there was either a fight or a flight reaction. And I looked at this note, and I looked at the lecture, the students I was talking to, and I said, no, but this is not right. Animals don't have a fight or a flight button. They have a sequence of events and emotions and instincts and feelings in between. They don't just run or kill you. And some more than most. Elephant, I believe, more than most. It's more complex, the decision-making process. So I believe there's that side to them, but they're also wild animals. They're top of the league as far as destructive power goes, obviously. So there is that tremendous amount of respect that goes into it. And I think if you can unpack what respect means, and if you can unpack what a sense of wonder means, and if you can unpack what a sense of adventure means, I think you can come up with some kind of understanding of what it takes to understand elephant. I don't believe
I've also been given that text that says it's fight or flight, and they often add in fornicate as well. These are the three basic reactions when animals.
Right, I forgot about that. Yes.
But where does curiosity lie? There's never, an animal like an elephant that is not overly concerned. If it's an impala, everything's trying to eat it. Its reaction to most things is, I'm going to run away because I don't have the wherewithal to experiment and find out if you're a nice guy or not. And elephants can afford curiosity.
Yeah.
So, that's right. A very important part of the spectrum you spoke about.
That's it. And if you are walking along or driving along and you see an elephant and it suddenly starts walking towards you and it approaches you completely randomly, or what we consider randomly, up into a very close distance, and then it sort of looks at you, gives you sort of the time of day, scratches its head with its trunk, and then just turns around and walks away quite deliberately. It's those kind of wondrous moments that a lot of people speak about with elephant, and that's curiosity, isn't it?
And that's something you see even with giraffes.
That was weird. That was strange behavior, wasn't it? Why is the elephant doing that? That's strange. I didn't see that in the textbook. And you would say, well, no, the elephant did it because it's normal behavior for the elephant.
Yeah, it can afford curiosity, and it's interesting the animals that can. I mean, as giraffes, I've actually had, particularly if you lie down, will actually come up and approach to have a look at what you're doing. Baboons, definitely. They've got the strength of numbers and the ability to flee pretty quickly. But elephants, without a doubt, sometimes you can just see it's curiosity. They instigate the interaction, and it isn't always the high drama of ears flapping, trumpeting. And those moments may not be as spectacular on YouTube, but I think in real life they can be a lot more rewarding.
you've just said it. They instigate the interaction, and they come across the line. If there's an invisible line between what the animal should be doing, according to our understanding of that animal, and the other side of the line represents, wow, it's doing something different. Elephants spend quite often most of the time on our side of the line. And when there's an interaction such as that, an elephant coming up close to a vehicle or some kind of one-on-one, it happens a lot where there's one person that just somehow gets the attention of the elephant. And quite often with some reflection or retrospect, you find out that that person may be pregnant or has suffered a loss, or maybe there's something happening uniquely to that person that the elephant is just reacting to. And this is real. It happens a lot. And
I've never encountered that, but I absolutely believe you, and it's very credible to me. But that's fascinating. I hadn't heard of that, and it reminds me a bit of what went from anecdote to science, which is often how science begins, is with a collection of anecdotes of people being diagnosed with a tumor, and they say, my dog's been nuzzling that spot for however long. And eventually it was researched, and now dogs are actually being used to detect cancer and are doing it better than much of our fantastic technology. It's a pretty wacky way to do a pregnancy test, but perhaps most people don't know that pregnancy tests are actually based on an African frog, the platana. There's something in the hormones that they've harvested to do pregnancy tests comes from an African frog. But yeah, and also talking about trauma and loss.
How many other things you end up going down? It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is. So we don't have a huge amount of time left. So a couple of quick questions here.
Peter,
is there?
Can I backtrack do you mind?
Of course. No, not at all.
Just talking about the communication between the dogs and the person with cancer. I think if we confine what intelligence is and how we see the world is kind of confined by our limits of physicality and what our mentality and our physicality. That's our boundary. But if we accept that there's stuff happening outside that boundary, we all have stories of animals communicating and mysterious events just happening that do not happen by chance. If you consider that elephants are able to communicate with one another over impossibly vast distances by using subsonic energy, infrasound, that they're able to pass on quite often quite complex information to individuals 80, 100 kilometers away. It's possible. So my understanding is that if an animal is able to communicate in such complex and advanced ways, there must be a reason for it. The information that's being passed around must be crucial to that animal's survival. So that gives the animal a presence or an understanding that I think deserves a little bit more attention. Absolutely.
And again, for people who might be either poo-pooing what you said or wanting to know more, I'm not going to go into a lecture, and you should give the lecture if we did, but by infrasound, sound too deep for us to hear. I think we start hearing at about 35 hertz or 35 cycles a second when we're younger. Us, with a bit more grey, we start, higher, 50, 60. Elephants' communication that we know of so far starts at 5. This is something that would make Pavarotti sound like he'd been castrated. It's to them, he's a soprano. But that deep sound travels particularly well through the ground, and elephants are picking it up through their heels, and they have an audio nerve there. They're hearing through their feet. For anybody that thinks that's wacky, there's new headsets you can get, great for running, that play through your cheekbones rather than through your ears. You can hear through your cheeks. You can cover your ears up, put these on, and still hear your music. So it's possible to hear through other parts of your body, and elephants absolutely do that. Yeah. So, and as you said, it's critical information that they must be passed.
The tip of the trunk, just going back to the bees and drones story, the inside, the first foot or so of an elephant's trunk has the same very advanced sensitive tissue that they have in their feet. So when you see an elephant resting a trunk on the ground, it's also detecting or decoding emails coming in.
Right. Yeah.
That's what the E in email stands for. When bees sting them on the tips of their trunks or inside their trunk, and remember there's a lot of mucus there, there's a lot of moisture which will attract the bees. If a bee gets up there, boy, and stings an elephant, it must be agony, absolute agony for the elephant.
Agony and also temporary deafness of sorts.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Through swelling and inflammation, that would surely affect it. I mean, you think what we're like if we have an ear infection, how it affects our balance. We can get nauseous. It's debilitating. So yeah, I'd never considered that. That's I learn on every single one of these Deep in the Bush. I learn several things each time. That one is something I've never even considered. I did have two quick questions before we wind up. One is there a persistent myth about elephants that irks you, that needs clearing up? Or the flip side of that, is there a truth that needs to be told that people just aren't aware of?
I don't think, I think it's more about a truth. I think it's more about shouting to the rooftops, telling people what they really are about, what elephants really are about. There's, I think if you build up, again, going back to this, if you build up your impression of what is an elephant based on hearsay or based on your peers or Hollywood movies, which we all know are not really accurate documentaries, you'll come up with an impression of an elephant, and it's so not the right thing. And I think there's a truth to be told to that. If we can't understand or appreciate meaningfully the largest land mammal in the world, how are we to understand the insects, the birds, the plants, the viruses that live with us? How are we actually going to make this connection between corporate and ecological intelligence? We all understand the value of elephants as a keystone. We talk about a keystone species, which means an animal that, through its day-to-day activities, creates or destroys opportunity for other animals. That's a keystone. And elephant are keystone species, not only in an ecological circuit, but also in a sense of greater awareness. The more we can understand elephant or pay attention to the sense of wonder of elephant, I believe the more we'll fall in love with the other animals around us and nature and conservation in general.
I think that's the key, isn't it? That the falling. I spoke about evangelism. Another guide friend of mine, I think he put it far better, where he said guides should be matchmakers. They're not showing off the place that they live and their relationship. They should be getting their clients to form their own relationship with the wilderness. And I've always loved that. He's Richard Field said that to me.
Matchmakers, so, I like.
Yeah, one last thing for you here, and I think we possibly even covered this. We do like to finish on a positive note. What's some good news?
There's lots of good news, Peter, and as a conservationist, sometimes it's one of the greatest challenges is to not be caught up in the pessimistic wave. Mm-hmm. But my understanding is that with the sense of technology and with the sense of investment and with the with all the interest that's going into conserving wild areas, and I speak about Zakuma National Park in Chad as the prime example for me. This area was on its knees. It was dead. The ecosystem was dying. The poaching was rampant. There was just no opportunity to recover. There was no sense of tourism. It was just a crazy place. And with the investment of like-minded people, this slowly started to change. And under extreme conditions, maybe more extreme than we've considered or experienced in Southern Africa, it changed, it turned. And where Zakuma is now, as a functioning ecosystem, on a managerial level, on a ecotourism level, and on a regenerative level, I think is something that needs to be shouted at the rooftops. The whole world can learn from Zakuma National Park and Chad.
And who would have thought good news coming out of Central Africa?
Yeah, go figure that. I mean,
Yeah.
Chad's been in the news the last few days for all the wrong reasons, but this for me is it. Out of the most obscure, unexpected, or surprising areas, the lights can come on, and people can fall in love with nature and become matchmakers, as you say. And that for me, the next matchmaker out there, got no idea who he is or what safari or what trail he's going to be on, but I know if I can get someone out on the ground, stalking up to elephant in a safe environment, of course, perhaps the next time that person sees a poached elephant, or a photograph of a poached elephant, or sees an ivory trinket carved on some distant mantelpiece, or whatever the situation is, then that becomes personal. That person has to take that personally, and there's great hope in that, And I see my work as attempting to create a union of like-minded people, all celebrating the sanctity of common sense.
I love that. Yes, is common sense considered sacred? It's
how it goes with nature goes it with us. That's all it comes down to, isn't it?
I think I'm going to counter with a quote that I was thinking of as we were talking about intelligence, from the late, great Douglas Adams, who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And I think it was the book So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. And I'll get the wording, it won't be quite right, but they were talking about the complexity of the dolphin brain. And he said that humans held fast to the notion that they were the most intelligent animal on the planet because we'd built cities, we'd invented spreadsheets, we had medications to deal with our stress, whereas all the dolphins ever did was eat fish, play, and have sex. Dolphins thought they were the most intelligent animals on the planet for exactly the same reason. And I think that's pretty much sums up what we're trying to say.
That's wonderful. You've just summed it up. And wow. I remember reading Douglas Adams on safari in Botswana in the 1980s.
Yeah.
I've never come across that. That is the most wonderful quote.
Yes. I certainly didn't get it word perfect, but it's pretty much, we've taken 1 hour and 7 minutes, and I could have just led with that. Thank you so much for your time, Alan. This has been fascinating, edifying. I now also know where the Ian email comes from. Learned that today. And I hope we could do this again soon, and that you can get back up to Chad, Zakuma. People look that up. In the safari world, the most sought after destination is Zakuma in Chad, Zakouma. Maybe Alan will guide you there. Look him up as well. And it's been fantastic. And again, my mind is whirring with all the information that's come in. And I'll let you go now and carry on raising your kids and doing all the good things you've got to do. We'll speak again soon.
Thank you, Peter. It's been great, and thank you so much for the opportunity. And what you're doing is so important. It's so valuable to create platforms, to have discussion, for people to raise original ideas and inspire, and keep on inspiring. I think it's crucial what you're doing. So thank you for the opportunity to be a part of it.
Thank you. It's very flattering. I hope we will chat again soon.
Thanks, Peter.